Hi, good evening. This is John Hawkins Jr. with Gateway Counseling Center. Welcome to our Tuesday night Facebook Live. We do this every Tuesday night at 8:15, where I forgot to put it on airplane mode and I'm getting nailed with text there. We do this every night at Tuesday at 8:15, where we just give you information, support, all kinds of things that we can provide for you. We have a mission here to help as many people as we can in every way we can. So we do, at our center here, we do individual, family, couples therapy for all mental health issues, relational issues, spiritual issues. I myself am a trauma and addiction specialist. I also specialize in couples therapy and peak performance coaching. So you can hit me up during the week at gatewaycounseling.com, at John H at gatewaycounseling.com, where I'll respond to you. You don't have to wait till Tuesday night. I'll answer any questions you have or any resources you need I can steer you towards. And like I was saying here, we have a mission. My dad and I founded this center, I guess about 12 years ago, where we're just trying to help as many people as we can in every way we can. So that's why we do this here on. I've got to put that on airplane mode next time. I'm getting nailed, man, like never before with calls and texts. So pardon me there. So, all kinds of different topics people come up with that ask me during the week, or can you talk about this on Tuesday night? You can ask me questions live. You can watch recording later. If you feel like any of this is beneficial to yourself or someone could use the information, please forward it on, and then you can be a part of helping us, fulfill that mission of helping as many people as we can. So tonight, the topic I want to talk to you about, I've had a bunch of questions this week on, is boundaries. So maybe you've heard, about boundaries, but a lot of people still have a lot of confusion about what that actually means, where those need to be. So a boundary, I'll explain to you, we have kind of like 5 overall boundaries. We have physical, sexual, emotional, spiritual, intellectual, and I would also say maybe a 6th is boundary around self, and I'll explain all those. So obviously physical boundary would be somebody touching me. Hey Andrea, made it at the beginning this week. So physical boundary would be, your physical space. So if I don't want someone to touch me in a certain way or get too close to me, and I ask them like please don't touch me, or whatever, so you're expressing a physical boundary. So that one's pretty easy. A sexual boundary, it can be around touch, could be around saying sexually explicit things, making sexually explicit jokes, and and I feel like that crossed some kind of boundary for me, and I express a boundary again, like I may say, like I appreciate if you don't say those kind of things around me, or that doesn't the way you're looking at, whatever it may be. There's some kind of violation. So in like some families, the boundaries can be either too rigid or too loose. So let's say if we take those first ones, physical and sexual boundaries. So like in some families, maybe sex is never talked about. It's considered shameful or secret. So the boundaries are too rigid around sexuality. We don't discuss it, we don't bring it up at all. So that's not healthy on one side. On the other side, let's say, people are walking around inappropriately nude, poorly, dressed, or the content of what they talk about is not appropriate for the age of their kids, or things like that, making jokes in front of that, or exposing kids. A lot of my adult clients who may be compulsive using pornography or other things like that, they were exposed to that oftentimes in a friend's home or in their home, or somebody exposed them to movies or or photographs, whatever it was, because there was not good enough boundaries in the environment. So it didn't protect the kids from getting exposed to sexually explicit things or touch or any of those things. The other ones, again, intellectual, emotional, spiritual. So if somebody is telling me how to think, how I shouldn't think, they're crossing what I'm thinking, right? They don't have magical powers to put themselves in my body and make assumptions about my thought process, my motivation, all that kind of stuff. So then when somebody violates your boundary, there is a level of anger or irritation that comes up, because that's the energy to help us protect our boundaries. So let's say when people are assaulted physically, sexually, things like that, it's like my body wants to stop them, but they overpower me and I have to go into a submissive state. So emotional boundaries, right? Telling me how I'm feeling, how I should feel, again, what my motivation is, all these kind of things is, these violation of my boundaries as an individual and violation of my emotional boundaries. Spiritual boundaries, what I should believe, what I shouldn't believe, putting pressure on me in those areas is a violation of my physical boundaries. So most people grew up in a home where I would say you didn't get a full experience of having a sense of self, where all my thoughts, behaviors, feelings, even if they needed to be guided or corrected, were at least acknowledged, validated, and helped me explore those. So I had to, put away certain parts of self, all these kind of things. So you didn't get to have that full experience. So oftentimes it's hard to give that to others. The way that looks in the real world is, let's say you bring up a topic, it's political, spiritual, sports team, whatever it is, and the other person's like incensed that you have a different opinion. They don't have an ability to let you have your own experience. They're like appalled that you would think differently. How could you think that? Well, because I'm not you, for one, right? And I don't need to think like you, feel like you, believe like you. In a healthy relationship, the other person can be allowed to have their own experience. Most of the time when we're getting into conflict with people, it's because we don't have that ability. So if you ask somebody, like if I'm working with a couple or family, the question wouldn't come from a curious standpoint of like, well, what makes you think that, or where's that come from? It's more like, well, why do you think that? Which is, you're wrong, is the synonym for what I just said. So then I don't want to open up, explore, share, because you're basically telling me how I think or feel or believe is wrong. So it's not a safe environment to step into. So again, a lot of this comes up. People are getting more educated in my experience about boundaries, reading books on boundaries, but they're still, curious or confused of like, well, where is the line of what's healthy and what's not? So I was coaching someone today on a little tweak in how they were communicating. So they were telling their partner, you're being distant, then, because that could not be the other person's experience. So then I'm violating their boundary as an individual by telling them that they're being distant, because they may not be doing that or feeling that way. A more appropriate way to communicate that, where you're not violating another person's boundary, is to say, I feel distant, or I feel like we're distant today. How's it feel for you? Or, so then I'm sharing my experience, which I have a right to do, but I'm not telling the other person what they're experiencing. So that would be crossing their boundary. So I hope some of this stuff is making sense. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated, but when, let's say if you're fooling around with somebody, like, joking, wrestling, and they say, okay, like, look, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to talk about this, or, please, don't touch me anymore. You need to respect that boundary, because they just verbalized it very clearly, versus like, well, oh, come on, I'm just kidding, or, forcing the other person to talk about different things like that. So then you're not respecting their boundaries, which means you're not acting in love. So if you really care about the person, now again, we all inadvertently, even good people sometimes cross boundaries. We don't intend to, but when the other person confronts that or verbalizes that or how they're being affected, then you need to be able to respect that and say like, hey, okay, I get it, no problem. So like with clients, it can get tricky for me sometimes, because people have all kinds of defenses. I have to help them overcome and release so we can get to their core emotions, help them start learning how to deal with those. So they may initially say, look, I don't really want to keep doing this or talking about that, because there's resistance there. And if I just run away, I'm not much of a therapist. But at the same time, I need to be sensitive to how much is too much challenge, how much is not enough, whatever that may be. So remember, you have a right to verbalize boundaries, respect other people's boundaries. Remember those 5 key categories: physical, sexual, emotional, intellectual, spiritual. People don't have the right to tell you how to feel, what to think, how to believe. You don't have a right to do that to other people. So work on the area that you tend to struggle in. So if you're not letting the other person have their own experience, or how could you think that, or getting so incensed that they have a different opinion than you, work on creating space for them and like backing up, letting them have their own experience. If you're doing that, if you're telling people how to think, what they're feeling, or what their motivation was, remember, you do not have magical powers. You're not inside their body. You are not them. Allow them to be them. there is a cognitive distortion called, I think asymmetrical, I don't know if it was attribution or whatever, but it's the idea that when we see others, we feel like we really know what they're feeling, what their motivation is. Like we can deduce this from their behaviors or some things they're saying. We don't feel like others can do that as well with us because we're having all these complex feelings and we don't feel like they get us, but we feel like we get everybody else. So it's really a cognitive distortion or an error in thinking to think that, it's called asymmetrical insight is the name of that. So, to really like start to pull that back, have humility, realize people, we don't get them until they say we get them. We don't get to say we get them. So take the time to explore curiously with people, give them space, respect those boundaries. I hope that clears that up for some of you, because I know there's a lot of confusion people tend to have around boundaries. Even though people are, again, getting to have some more knowledge about it, but not quite getting it all together. So watch that over if you want to. Send it to anybody you feel could be helpful. That's it for tonight. You can meet us back here next week at 8:15 on Tuesday nights, where I will be here. Once again, you can email me at johnh@gatewaycounseling.com. So I'll answer your questions during the week. You can ask them next Tuesday, but you don't have to wait. I love responding. You can follow us here on Facebook, on Instagram at Gateway Center, and on YouTube at Gateway Counseling Center. All right, guys, have a great week, and I will see you next Tuesday night.